Hey, good morning. It's Travels with Dottie, and I have a full-time RVer video for Wastewater. I'm going to talk to you about what I've learned over the past couple of years of doing full-time RV living and dealing with my wastewater in both RV park and boondocking, long-term boondocking. And I think you're going to find a lot of this information valuable. There's some products and gadgets that I use, and I'm not promoting them. I'm not paid to promote any of them. These are just the things that have ended up working for me. The first thing I want to talk about is the simplest thing for you to do, and often, especially when boondocking, is the hardest thing to do. But I'm going to take you into my bathroom and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Come on with me. Here we are. And the kind of the first thing that I want to suggest is that you get yourself, if you don't have a porcelain toilet, get rid of that plastic. And let me turn on the light here so you can see a little bit better. Get rid of that plastic and get yourself a decent ceramic bowl. Why? Because with the plastic one, it discolors and it'll bother you every time you go to the bathroom. Okay, so here's what I'm going to show you. Here's how much I fill up my bowl when I use it. That's pretty full, isn't it? That's about at least 2/3 full. That's how much water I put in every time solids go into my system. I want you to remember that because that's critically important. And why is that hard? Well, let me tell you why it's hard. When you're boondocking, especially, if you're in an RV park, it's probably not a big deal. But if you're boondocking and you're wanting to conserve water, it's hard to do that. But believe me, it's worth it. There's all kinds of problems that I'm sure most of you are aware of that can happen in black tanks. The pyramid of solids that develop and can ruin your whole camping experience. And it can cost a lot of money to adequately clean out a black tank where that's happened. You don't want solids to build up in your tank or your pipes or anything. And it's especially important if you're in a fifth wheel and you have the possibility of piping coming from your wastewater that makes turns, and even sometimes in some fifth wheels they make 90-degree turns. You need to keep everything flowing, and you need to keep solids going through your system and out of your RV. And the best way to do that, I'm telling you, is to have adequate water when you flush. Don't skimp on the water. And I'll talk about I'll talk a little later about boondocking specific things, and I'm going to tell you what I do. I boondock long term every winter. I'm in Quartzsite, Arizona from the middle of November until the middle of March. And I'll tell you how I deal with that. There's controversy on should you put stuff in your black and your gray tank. And there are people that think, absolutely no, you just use enough water, you don't put any additives in. Personally, I don't agree with that. I think the majority of the professionals that you'll find when you're doing research will agree to put additives in. And there are lots of different products, let's face it. I've used a lot of the products myself, and all these videos that people do where they test them against each other, I've watched a ton of them so you don't have to. And I've come down to two products that I think are, for me, absolutely work the best. And the first one I've been with for the longest is Happy Camper. You might have heard of that. It is a powder. There's a powder There's a little scoop. One little scoop for my size tank, which is 25 gallons, is going to be plenty. So I do have to make sure I mix that with enough water in the bowl so it dissolves, and then I put it into the tank. You don't want this to clump either. The other one is newer. It's called Liquefied. And if you've ever seen Matt's RV reviews, he's a big RV review channel. This is his product that he's promoting, and I've been using this for several months. And I think the performance of these products are just about equal. Here's what I really like about Matt's product, though, is it's a liquid, and you dispense it this way, you squeeze it, and it puts the right amount in this little chamber. You pour it into the bowl, and you're all done. So those are the two products that I would recommend because I use them. Let's talk about a couple of topics. Valves and flushing out your black tank. Let me show you my setup. Hopefully you have one of these. This is a black tank flush where you can put water into your black tank, fill it up, dump it, fill it up again, dump it, so you clean stuff out. Let me show you. One thing you want to watch out for is you don't want to overfill it, because where's it going to come out? It's going to come out in your toilet, go all over your rig. When I hook up a hose to it, look down at my hose, I have a little gadget on there, so reset it, that tells me how many gallons are going in, so I can make sure that I put far less than 25 gallons in an empty tank, so I don't risk overflowing. Overflowing is something that you do not want to do. Well, let's come back here, and I'm at an RV park now. So we're going to come down here, and I'm going to explain a couple of things. If you look up here, this is my gray tank valve, and this is my black tank valve, right? If I want to empty out, I first empty out the black tank, and then I follow it up with emptying out the gray tank. Why? Well, even if the black tank, the solids are, pretty much broken up and everything, it's still pretty gross, and it gets in the hose here. And the gray tank water is much cleaner, so we want that to follow it and do its job in cleaning out this hose. Black tank first, then the gray tank. You might wonder, hey, you're all hooked up to a sewer here, why don't you just leave them open? Really bad idea. Really bad, super bad idea for the black tank because to break up those solids, you need that liquid in there, and so you want the tank to be filling. The gray tank is a bad idea because you want that gray tank water in there to flush out this line when you empty the black tank. Now, let me show you something else. I have an extra valve that I've put on that I bought off Amazon, and it's got a clear sleeve on it so I can see what the water looks like when it's going through. And it also has this attachment so I can attach that same hose here, and I can flush both tanks from the opposite way, right? So what I would do is I would empty my tanks, I would hook up that same hose, I would open up the black tank, and it would force water up back through that valve, and it's just an additional way of cleaning the tank. And I can close the black tank, open the gray tank, and it can flush the gray tank the same way. Why is it important? Well, let me tell you. You don't want to have problems with your valves. I did have a problem this past year, and I was glad that I had this extra valve because it's a good backup to have in case there's a failure of either one of these two valves, like I had with this one. Here's what had happened, is that My valve got stuck on the gray tank and it wouldn't close. So what did I do? I used my strength to force it. And what ended up happening is it bent the rod and it completely broke the mechanism. So I was never able, since then, almost a full year, not able to close my gray tank. And it cost me, for parts and labor, almost $300 to have that replaced, and I just had that replaced this week. So that was an expensive mistake. A good rule of thumb that I should follow, and so should you, is when things don't work, don't force them. You can make it worse, as I did. But everything's okay now. I have a new valve in there, and everything is working perfectly. But I was glad I had this safety valve, because guess what would happen if I had gray tank, the water in the gray tank? It would come right up to this valve, and if I didn't have this valve here, it would just be leaking out constantly, or I'd have to put a cap on there that probably wouldn't be very secure. It would be a nightmare. You want to have this extra valve in case something goes wrong. You've got a backup. Both these valves can be broken, but I can stop the flow right here before it gets out and I have some kind of a disaster. You might notice underneath here I have these things. That's just to create a slope that when you're in an RV park, that gravity does its job and it gets it down into the sewer. And there's another clear thing there that shows you what color, what the consistency is of what you're draining out. And it's useful to know that. I'm going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. But when you're boondocking, you don't have this. So what do? Well, I have this. Do you see this tote hanging on my ladder? It's a 36-gallon tote, and it fits snugly in the back of my pickup truck. And I have what they call a macerator pump that I'm not going to bring it out. I can't show you absolutely everything. The video would be far too long. But the macerator pump fits on the end of this instead of the hose, and it attaches to 12 volt, and it pumps out the waste, both gray and black, through a dedicated garden hose that goes into the tote when it's laying in the bed of the pickup truck. I drive the pickup truck to the dump station, and through gravity, I open up this, put a hose on it, open up this valve, and my tank is dumped. You may wonder, well, Rob, why do you do that? Why don't you just drive your rig to the dump station? Seems like it'd be a lot easier. Well, not for me, and not for a lot of people. Let me put this down and we'll turn it around again. When I set up for long-term boondocking in Quartzsite out in the desert with my friends, my camp setup is pretty extensive, and I break and camp and hooking up my trailer and taking it someplace. And the way I use water, I have to dump every 2 weeks. And if you're a couple and you use more water than me, which you probably will, I'm going to talk about my water conservation in a minute. You could be having to dump every week, or even more often than that if you're using a lot of water. Myself, that tote, once every 2 weeks I have to dump, and it takes the whole process, because I've gotten used to it, takes 30 minutes at the most. There is a big drawback to potentially a big drawback to using a tote, and that's I don't get to flush out my tanks like I showed you I do here in an RV park. In fact, this past winter, I went from about November 10th until March 15th without flushing either one of my tanks. It sounds horrible. Well, it's not, because I followed the rule of filling that toilet bowl 2/3 of the way up. Regardless of what that meant to me in water conversation, I was relentless in doing that every single time. And I used these products. And let me show you a picture right here of how clear my blank tank was on my last flush here shortly after I got back from the desert in an RV park. It looks like drinking water. It is absolutely flawless because I treat my tank well by using lots of water for solids and treating it with these enzyme treatments. So not being able to flush my black tank did not have a negative impact on me. Now, I'm a single guy, and I said every 2 weeks. Well, how do I conserve water? Well, it may not be the same as you're willing to do at all, because I hardly ever take a shower in my rig when I'm boondocking. And when I do take a shower, it's what they call a Navy shower, where the nozzle is, I have a switch that turns the nozzle on and off, and I'll get the water heated up. I'll get wet real quick, turn it off, soap up, turn it on, rinse off, that's it. Just a few, maybe 2 or 3 gallons. And I don't have hair to wash. If you have a great deal of hair, you're a woman with a lot of hair, you're not going to be able to get away with showering like that. How do I keep clean though? If I'm not taking showers very often at all, I think I took 2 or 3 in the rig, and you go, oh my gosh, how you must stink, you must be dirty. No, there's a couple other products that I want to talk to you about, and I'm going to start with my favorite one. It's called scrubs, and these are pads that you soak in warm water, and they kind of suds up, and you can clean your whole body with one of these pads. And you air dry, and there's no, for some reason, whatever, you just add water, there's no soapy film, you don't have to rinse off. This stuff is wonderful, and you feel, or at least I feel, as fresh and clean as I do when I take a shower. If you don't like that idea, there's a couple other alternatives. There's baby wipes. Good old standby, they're available everywhere. You can get clean using these, trust me. And then if you want to spend a little bit more money, there's things like this. This is called the Massive Wet Wipe, extra large. You open this, and it's like the size of a bath towel, and it's designed for bathing. And that's 3 products that I've used. This is my favorite one. There are lots of other products that you can use out there. The other alternative, for example, in Quartzsite, there are 2 or 3 places you can go and pay $10, $12 for a shower, and you can, be in there for 20 minutes or whatever. I do that occasionally, but rarely, because these products are enough for me. When I'm boondocking, using this method, 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, I have to put that tote in the back of my truck, fill it up. And the other thing that's unrelated to wastewater, but you're probably curious, well, how do I get fresh water in my freshwater tank? Well, the answer to that's very simple. I have a 6-gallon container that's always in my truck, and every time I go to town, I spend 4 quarters to fill up the 6 gallons with salt-free filtered water in town. And every time I come back to the camp, I take the 6 gallons, I put it into the tank. So 2 or 3 times a week, I'm keeping up with enough fresh water for the toilet, for things like making coffee and cooking. it's plenty. Now, one of the things I didn't mention about the tote is the combined capacity of the gray and black water tank is 50 gallons, 25 apiece. And I mentioned it's a 36-gallon tank. So if I'm really full in both tanks, that tote is not going to, that's not going to cut it. So there are times where I'm really full, where I make 2 trips. And it's not that difficult. It adds probably, instead of 30 minutes, it's 45 minutes. But most of the time, I just get away with the 25 gallons, 36 gallons, because I'm not at the 50 gallons. So I hope this information was useful for you, and especially if you love boondocking like I do, this is the way to do it. I hope you all have a great day, and I hope this information helped you, and I do appreciate it when you watch my videos. Thank you.